Alrighty,
my name is Raynor, as I've gotten that beautiful introduction and bio earlier. I'm not going to read to you this morning just because I haven't had enough coffee to do so in a way that's productive. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about my research and about my paper. Let's see who we have in the building so far. Raise your hand if you have your own third ward story. Is there anybody that's been to third ward? Here now we have some guests from out of town and out of state, so we're going to have to help them to understand what third ward means to our community, and I will help everyone to understand what it means to this paper and to this study. I am a proud member still of the community of Third Ward and also of the University of Houston, as mentioned earlier, and there's some other people in the room that I see here that are as well. At U of H, when I was there as an undergraduate student, a graduate student, and as a professor there, we can see the material culture of Third Ward change in the years that I started out as a bright green undergrad and now an old grizzled person that is upset to take the shuttle and still have to pay for parking. So something that is a little bit heart-wrenching at the time. So this study that we put together is mixed methods, mostly qualitative, and we are looking at responses, not from the student population. Is it okay if I take the right?
Yes, please.
The students, our audience just got a lot younger and a lot better. All right, so I'm going to ask you students the same thing that I asked our audience earlier. Do you have a third ward story? Raise your hand if you've been to Third Ward, Texas. Anybody been here before? All right, so we're going to talk about it just a little bit. Mention that as an alum and a faculty member at the University of Houston, interacted with the Third Ward community for a long time, and we've seen the affective gentrification on the community in real time while it is taking place. The study that we put together was both an ethnography that was sort of unavoidable as a participant of the community. Any investigation that I would make would include my own biases in it, and what Africana Studies teaches us is that objectivity is at times a facade, and it is something that detracts, or the effort thereof detracts from a true context of whatever study it is that you're putting together. So what I wanted to look at was the gentrification reaction from alumni perspectives of the alum of U of H and Texas Southern University, to take both schools, because as we've seen that both schools in an anecdotal way have a separate material culture, separate sets of resources and lifestyles when you're inside of those structures. What happens when you leave those structures, and how is it that you feel about this place? Do you feel ownership and belongingness? Does gentrification affect you? Is it that it's still your neighborhood, even though it was likely your neighborhood only temporarily, or what is your continued connection to this place after leaving school, so whether it's undergrad or graduate school? So just to give a little background on those places, both the University of Houston and Texas Southern University were founded in 1927, and that is not coincidental that they would both share the same year, but rather on purpose as one educational institution for whites and one for blacks. TSU is actually the older of the two, chartered first. So if they were to ever incorporate, U of H would have to take the Texas Southern University's name, because as first on the charter. When we're looking at both schools, they were never designed to have equity in the neighborhood in which they're represented. Let's give you just a couple of facts in that background now. The endowment of the University of Houston is approaching $943 million. The endowment at Texas Southern is $54 million. When we're looking at population totals, we're at 43,000 students at the University of Houston, and TSU has just under 10,000 students. Texas Southern is 80% black, and we think about Africana students at U of H, we have 10% black students are approaching their population value at U of H. When we look at it in an anecdotal way, just as my colleagues and my fellow alumni did, we saw that U of H has lots of cool new stuff going on, lots of buildings, lots of outgrowth. There is a monorail, and Texas Southern University still has the city's oldest housing project on its campus. Okay, so anyone who knows Third Ward knows CUNY Homes, right, and that is still there. So what does that material culture say about your experience while you're there, and how does it influence your remembrance once you've gone? So when it's time for you to donate to your college, and you'll be asked, not after you have been graduated, but 2 weeks before, we'll ask you to start giving back. How does that feel to give back to that culture? So we're looking at the conceptual frameworks that we're polling in this ethnography, and also the qualitative responses. We're looking at a couple of things that center really around psychological ownership and gentrification. One of the controversial questions that came up during our conversation was, were students, regardless of ethnicity, perceived race, or culture, technically gentrifiers in that third ward neighborhood? So even if you consider yourself a member of the original demography of that neighborhood in an ethnic or racial way, were you really the community in which the neighborhood was founded to serve or was forced to serve at some point due to districting material? So when we're looking at what gentrification means to third ward, we're looking at 176% housing cost rises from the years 2000 to 2013. We're looking at geographies, meaning locations and places. We can stand in third ward and we can see a division on the streets, the pavement, we can see what the asphalt looks like, which communities are served, whether these are older structures, if you're going to Mr. Calhoun's and buying some paraphernalia for your fraternity or sorority, or if you're going to the new smoothie place that's on the other side of the tracks, literally the other side of the tracks. What does it look like while it is either there? But then we're also talking about geographies as areas of sub-national spaces. I see all of these lovely students here with their branded materials from their school, and the UHD logo is here. And we should know that if we've been in an educational institution, that branding is really important. School colors, we have an ID card, you have a police force that belongs to that institution. So we're trying to really manipulate the ontology of your experience. So when you step on that campus, you have a different level of boundaries than others. You have an ID card that says you have a right to be here, even though as a citizen, you have rights to other areas as well. So we're talking not only about the literal geography, but also the visceral geography. What sort of things hang in your mind and in your body, your psychological and physiological historical remembrances of this place. For instance, I used to drive, I'm telling lies, I used to ride the bus from Acres Homes to Third Ward, 2 buses, sometimes 3, and my knees still remember. Okay, so they remember what it feels like to be on that bus. Have you ever had a professor that made your heart rate increase a little bit because that person was very difficult in grading? What about walking in the sun through these places will you remember 10 years later? And that's why we really wanted to focus on the alumni of these organizations and not current students, because lots of college studies, even when we're dealing with college gentrification, talks about current students, but you're still in that manipulation. You're still very proud to be from that place. You still have that branded material. You're very close to the situation. We wanted to look at people that were elder and could take a step back and say, now that I've gotten a mortgage, now that I have a job that has branded stuff, how do I feel about this place? So we were looking for psychological ownership. Did you make a spot that was just yours at one of these locations? Do you feel particularly offended about gentrification, or do you think it's a good idea based on being a step away from it now? So the rest of, or the subsequent structures of analysis that we're putting forward is looking at the alumni remembrances of what they did on their time on campus concerning collective work and collective responsibility. So how is it that you made an economy in this place? Is this one going to give you a ride to the store? You'll give this person money for gas? Is there someone that's doing everybody's hair that is in the dorm? How is it that we're exchanging gifts and goods in order to get things done as a community? So looking at the study, we took 10 people that had attended and were conferred degrees at multiple levels from University of Houston and Texas Southern University. Of those, 3 of them had an overlap, meaning 3 participants went to both TSU and to U of H. We set up a focus group. There were 5 men, 5 women. We just talked about a couple of questions, and the research questions that we were getting to were just trying to figure out what was the memory of that material culture. How did it make you feel about the current gentrification? Did you consider yourself a gentrifier while you were on campus? And what memories do you hold in that psychological ownership? So we asked just a few questions, looking for evidence of that collective work, bartering, and participation that goes to the Africana worldview and use narrative storytelling. One particular moment in the focus group that was interesting in the results was looking at the outcome of people sharing the same language. So that language of the neighborhood itself, knowing which particular store a person was speaking about without identifying it by street, what services that this place offered, discussing that even if you lived very far away in a different part of town, that you still returned to Third Ward for certain things that you got a love for when you were in undergrad or in graduate studies, and how you felt about Third Ward itself. I would ask, are you from Third Ward or are you of Third Ward? And there's a difference. Okay, so do you feel like you have been rooted from this place, or did you place roots in it? Or you just divorced from it? And 10 out of 10, I did not have a participant that says, oh no, I just went to school there and that was it. They've made soul ties to the place. They come back for volunteerism, for services. They bring their children. I know I bring mine. And we are still of this place, even if we're not from this place. Also looked for the use of possessive language, so our this or our that, and there wasn't that much difference, or differentiation, I should say, between each one of the communities. So if a person from U of H said something to a person from TSU, they still had a commonality of language, they knew the same places, we're in the same neighborhood. And TSU students always used to come and eat at our campus anyways at U of H. They used to take over our cafeteria and our spaces in our library. Still a little bitter about it. No, we would go over there too because they had the more live yard, so we would be there at TSU as well. So there is an exchange even between institutional participants there. So as far as those memory levels, psychological ownership, geographies, meaning can you remember what the walk was like? Can you remember what it was to be lost on either campus? Or how do you feel about being in a little gentrification? That was quite a controversial exchange that we had in the focus group, where I just asked simply, do you consider yourself a gentrifier? And we had a connection amongst at least 5 focus group members that thought that gentrifiers could only occupy one race or ethnicity. And so the answer was, no, we're black. We're not gentrifying this place because we're black people. I said, okay, well, you're a black person, but you're not from Third Ward, and you came here for a certain amount of time. And in the reveal of the conversation, it turns out that we realized these structures were built as locuses of gentrification. They were never meant to sustain the neighborhood. They were never meant for the neighborhood to experience the structures in the same way as the people that they would court to be there every semester, every term. So if you were associated with one of these institutions, you have likely stood in a space that another culture has stood in, and those resources were taken away from that person. So then what's that reconciliation in our community? What does it look like? And we'll notice that our campus organizations that are populated by Africana students and alumni, that they will come to Wheeler Avenue, they will come to Shape Community Center, they will come to the Shrine of the Black Madonna, mentioning places that are in Third Ward and the surrounding community, and they will donate time and space and resource to make sure that there is a reconciliation between those communities. So overall, I would love to continue this study and get more participants, add some more framework to it, and also just talk about a greater structure. So not just Third Ward or U of H and TSU, but as lots of colleges are built in areas that are designated urban or have a level of hyper-gentrification, what that means for the participants that are only there for a short amount of time. Thank you so much.